Hi everyone, I am Katja Kaine, creator of the Novel Factory and young adult fantasy author. This is the latest in our series of author interviews where we chat to authors of different genres to find out what makes them tick, how their processes work, and what their normal day looks like. So if you've ever wondered how professional authors get from blank page to final manuscript, then you are in the right place. Today, I am so pleased to be talking to Sarah Brooks, author of The Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands. Sarah won the Lucy Cavendish Prize in 2019 and a Northern Debut Award from New Writing North in 2021. She works in East Asian Studies at the University of Leeds, where she helps run the Leeds Centre for New Chinese Writing. She is co-editor of Samovar, a bilingual online magazine for translated speculative fiction. The Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands is her debut novel and was published by Weidenfeld and Nicholson in the UK and Flatiron Books in the US in June 2024. I am so pleased to be talking to you, Sarah, because I loved this book so much. Let me just read the Goodreads summary. For fans of Piranesi and the Midnight Library, a stunning historical fantasy novel set on a grand express train about a group of passengers on a dangerous journey across a magical landscape. It is said there is a price that every passenger must pay, a price beyond the cost of a ticket. There is only one way to travel across the wastelands, on the Trans-Siberian Express, a train as famous for its luxury as for its danger. The train is never short of passengers, each eager to catch sight of the wasteland's creatures more miraculous and terrifying than anything they could imagine. But on the train's last journey, something went horribly wrong, though no one seems to remember what exactly happened. Not even Zheng Weiwei, again, you'll have to correct my pronunciation, who has spent her life on board and thought she knew all of the train's secrets. Now the train is about to embark again, with a new set of passengers. Among them are Maria Petrovna, a grieving woman with a borrowed name, Henry Grey, a disgraced naturalist looking for redemption, and Elena, a beguiling stowaway with a powerful connection to the wastelands itself. Wei Wei knows she should report Elena, but she can't help but be drawn to her. As the girls begin a forbidden friendship, there are warning signs that the rules of the wastelands are changing and the train might once again be imperiled. Can the passengers trust each other as the wilderness outside threatens to consume them all? So, as I said, I absolutely adored this book. And I have to admit that I generally avoid books set in things called wastelands because I find them too bleak. And I avoid books with trains because I'm just not into trains. But I am so glad I read this and gave it a chance because as soon as I got into it, I realized that it was so rich and colorful and just full of life and full of imagination. So yeah, it just became one of my favorite books almost instantly. Love the concept of the child who is a native of the train, having been born there and spent her entire life there. And I really enjoyed the really surreal fantasy, which is totally different from most fantasy books that I read anyway. Um, and you did something I never suspected, which was you made me fall in love with trains. So
My job here is done.
exactly, that's it. So yeah, just to imagine this train as this living thing, which is, you know, an organism that's emerged from the sum of its parts. That's how I felt about it anyway. You know, others may not. I may have taken more than you said. Maybe you did say that. But yes, I just absolutely adored it. But yes, I could gush about your book all day, but it'd be better for people to experience it for themselves. But the hardback is out, but the paperback is just coming out soon, isn't it? Is that right?
The paperback is just coming out, so I'll hold it up here. So it's a little
Lovely.
bit different to the hardback, but we still have the beautiful train. I can't believe you didn't like you didn't like books about trains. Yes, so here it is. Yes, out in May. So yes, so it's been very exciting to see it, you know, have it out in hardback, but now see it come out in paperback,
Yeah.
and yes, and to get to talk about trains to people. I love them.
Who knew that would be fun?
Exactly.
Okay. So yeah, so let's dive in. I'd love to talk to you, Sarah, about, your kind of how you went into writing, your journey here, and also a bit more about the nuts and bolts of how you do things, and how things are going now. So yeah, if we just start with, talk to me about your early days as a writer, how you got into it, how you found your feet.
Yeah, I mean, I was, I'm the sort of the typical, the writer who was scribbling away as a child, and and very as a fantasy writer, I've been very, very loyal to the fantasy genre. I mean, I think in fact it was, and again, this is such a cliche, but I'm pretty sure it was The Hobbit that made me decide that I wanted to not only be a writer, but to write that kind of book. I remember reading it in junior school and talking with my friend about it, and basically, this is what I want to do. So it's taken me a long time to get there in terms of getting a book published. But yeah, I've really been sort of obsessed with fantasy since then, and spent my teenage years kind of scribbling away and writing very, very derivative, epic fantasies of my own.
Yeah.
Um, and then, as you do, and then, yeah, I suppose sort of they had a bit of a hiatus. So you're going to university, and then I moved abroad, and got sort of caught up with other things, and did a lot less writing in my 20s, until really until I sort of came back to Leeds, and started a PhD, and really as a way of kind of meeting people and having a bit more of a social life, I joined a little creative writing group, just in a cafe nearby, um, and and sort of rediscovered my love of writing through that. And then from that joined local groups in Leeds. So I joined the Leeds Writers Circle, and really just started writing more and more. And yeah, so it sort of went from a childhood obsession to kind of an adult just trying to find something to do that wasn't my PhD. And then yeah, sort of rediscovering it really, and sort of yes, beginning after that to take it more and more seriously. And I didn't do a kind of a creative writing master's or anything, but I did go to a creative writing workshop in the States.
Ah,
It's called Clarion West, and it is a workshop for science fiction and fantasy writers. And it's an amazing thing. It's a 6 week workshop, so it is, it's a big a big sort of time investment, but it's very well established, and they have scholarships and really generous funding, so it's more doable in some ways than some of the UK based
okay.
workshops.
And that's residential. So you went to the States for 6 weeks just to do that.
Yes, yeah. So
Wow.
again, I just and I realized that not everybody can take just 6 weeks away from their lives.
Sure.
But I was doing my PhD, and then just so decided, yes, I was just going to do this, and it was amazing. It was a real kind of turning point, in realizing just that there was all this. I think especially for science fiction and fantasy writers, there's this sort of whole ecosystem really of magazines and conventions and
Hmm.
meetups. So it was really important for that, just for sort of getting into the world of SFF writing as well as the writing itself. Yeah, and that's where I wrote the short story that became eventually, many years later, The Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands.
And is that when you kind of thought, I want to do this seriously, I want to be published?
Yes, yeah. Before that, I hadn't had anything published. I sort of sent off a couple of short stories and had rejections, and you know, um, but after that, I really started seriously with the short story writing, because I
Hmm.
think it is. Maybe especially with this particular genre, there are quite a lot of magazines still that accept short stories. So yeah, I sort of got into the writing and submitting and being rejected and being rejected again kind of thing. And yeah, so I have a whole very large folder of rejections, and a very much smaller folder of acceptances. But I think it was really great actually as a writer to, well, first of all, to help you, grow a thick skin with all these rejections.
Yeah.
Um, but those few acceptances were a really huge deal, and yeah, it was just nice to sort of feel that I was writing for somebody who wasn't just me.
Yeah.
So I found that the kind of the process of getting a story finished and submitting it and keeping going was really useful and has been very useful in terms of just navigating the publishing world where you have disappointments and rejections and you have to have that thick skin.
Yeah, yeah. I think going through the short story route, it seems to be fairly common. That's certainly something I did. I'd spent a lot of time
Mm.
submitting short stories to magazines and competitions before I kind of thought, right, now I'm going to try and write a long one.
Yeah.
And Sue Cunningham, who we interviewed previously, she said the same. She wrote about, I think she even had published like hundreds of short stories before
Oh,
she did the
wow.
novel.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to kind of cut your teeth, isn't it? And like you say, one of the most valuable things is this getting used to the rejections because you've just got to get used to it. As also, it does happen all the way through. It just never stops, right? So you have to come to
Exactly.
terms with it.
Yeah, and it's nice because you sort of start when you start getting the rejections that aren't just no, thank you, not for us, but that are a little bit
Yeah.
personalized, and so that say, please, please keep us in mind in the future, or please submit again. It becomes a really big thing. You're like, oh yes, I'm taking that next step. So I think it
Yes.
is a helpful process.
Yeah, it's good to have that feedback to, kind of someone external to let you know that you are actually getting better. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
and so early on, what were the biggest challenges? What helped you the most? And was there any advice you got that really didn't work for you?
I think in terms of yeah, I mean, I definitely find that first workshop it was just a local cafe, was a really great thing to do because I think the tutor there was just she was very just sort of encouraging and open and was just sort of her advice was just, well, we'll try different things and have a go at writing a poem or have a go at writing a short story. And she was it was because I think it was a very informal
Hmm.
setting, and it wasn't we're working towards a degree or even we're working towards a novel or a short story collection or anything. It was really just for people who wanted to write because they wanted to, just to sort of enjoy
Yeah.
themselves. I found actually that was incredibly freeing. And I've tried to really keep that in mind, find out what you enjoy and write it. And if I think that's just still one of the most
Yeah.
important things that
I think
I'm
that's so important because I do see a lot where the pursuing of trying to get published or any other particular goal crushes your creativity and it kind of like makes it all very demoralizing. And most of us write because we love it, because we just enjoyed it from the beginning. So I think that is so true, and that's really interesting that the place where you kind of got nurtured initially, it had that. Whereas if, from the beginning it had been like, right, this isn't good enough to get published, you might have just kind of
uh,
said, okay, well, I'm not good enough, let's not bother.
Exactly. So I do think it's one of the problems. I mean, as great as a lot of the creative writing courses are, I think you really have to you have to keep that in mind while you're doing it. And I definitely did. I mean, after Clarion West, this 6 week workshop, and I did start trying to submit work more and more, and it became more of a not a job at that time, but I was taking it more seriously. So every now and again, if I got demoralized, I would have to just take a step back and go, no, no, wait, you are doing this because you're enjoying it, not just because it's just in pursuit of this end goal.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
think
that's
that
so
was
true.
yeah, that was some of the best advice. In terms of things that so the other part of the question was things that didn't work for you,
Yeah.
right?
Was there any advice, or is there any hallowed advice that doesn't work for you or didn't work for you when you were learning?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always slightly wary of the show don't tell advice, which I think is really good advice and it is important, but I think it can be taken too far. And
Hmm.
sometimes you do just need to tell, because you can't your novel or your short story isn't infinitely long. And so I think sometimes you get certain bits of writing advice in your head and you feel I have to do it like that, whether it's show don't tell or write every day or write 1,000 words a day, definitely. Things like that. And I think if we don't follow them, we feel we're doing something wrong,
Yeah.
which I really don't think is the right thing. You know, you've got to find out what works for you in terms of how you write, where you write, when you write, how much time you have in your life. So that you have to absolutely write every day. Doesn't work for a lot of people. It doesn't work for me. And then some of that crafty stuff that including, yes, oh, it's always show, don't tell, I think isn't always right in that you've got to sometimes you have to just tell. And that can be an important part of telling a
Yeah.
story as well.
Oh, I agree. I agree. You need to know when. And I think that advice comes out so often because newer writers do tend to tell rather than show. But you're
Yeah,
right. Then it just gets out of hand. Um,
exactly.
I did a webinar yesterday with another writing coach who said she has this phrase which is just because Stephen King said something doesn't make it true. And I was like, yes, because I really think Stephen King is a great person. You know, I think he's a great writer, but I really disagree with a lot of his writing advice. And I find it very frustrating when people think that it's, like the law. And that goes for anything like show, don't tell, you must write every day, all of that stuff. So that's why I find it really
Exactly.
interesting. That's why I wanted to ask you that question so that we could kind of
Mm.
highlight some of those things.
Yes, and also because it just talking Stephen King, I love on writing. I think there's probably every writer has read this, and it's great. But yeah, he also talks a lot about adverbs, right? And you can't use the is that the right? I can never remember adverb. Yes,
Yeah,
the
that's right.
he said happily or whatever, and he said you should never do that. But one of my favorite writers is Terry Pratchett, who does that. He does that quite a lot, and he does it brilliantly. And so I feel I will still do that in my own writing. And
Yeah,
I realize if you do it too much, it's you don't want to do that. But I think again that you must never use this part of the English language that is open to us
yeah,
is not the right advice always.
that's it. So all in moderation, isn't it? Or also knowing why you're doing it, knowing the impact.
Yeah. Yes, doing it carefully and deliberately.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about your breakthrough moment.
Oh, in terms of just sort of when I realized that,
Well, I was thinking when you like what took you from aspiring writer to on the journey to publication.
oh, I mean, I think in terms of a kind of the practical, something that happened was definitely the Lucy Cavendish Prize.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, absolutely a turning point, kind of life-changing point, really. So this is the Lucy Cavendish Fiction Prize is a prize for women writers, and it's yeah, and I think they say they're looking for they're looking for page turning books. So they have this competition that's open every year, and I thought, okay, I'm going to enter this, partly just as a way of giving myself a deadline. And the novels that you enter the first few chapters of your novel, and it doesn't have to be finished by the time you enter, which is a really good thing. So I sort of thought I'm going to enter to have this deadline to take to make myself take my writing more seriously, and almost didn't do it because I got to I think the deadline was at midday, and I was just really struggling, getting closer and closer to the deadline. I had to have a synopsis as well as polishing this piece of
Dreaded
writing.
synopsis.
Yeah, a dreaded synopsis. And of course, I had the absolute crisis of confidence. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna submit it. It's rubbish. This is not going to go get anywhere. And luckily, I just forced myself to do it. And I'm so glad. So I think, in fact, that 5 minutes before the deadline of the Lucy of the prize closing was probably the turning point because I did force myself to do it. So got it in with minutes to spare. And yeah, and then I found, I was longlisted, shortlisted, and then won in the end. But I
So
think even sorry.
so it wasn't the full manuscript. Did you then have to submit the full manuscript to win, or was it based on the open?
No, no. I
Oh,
mean, that's one of the reasons why I think this competition is really great. So you don't have to. I know some
okay.
of them, if you get longlisted, you
Then they
then
want the
submit.
full. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one you
Okay.
don't. And it's a great prize because everybody on the shortlist gets the opportunity to have a one-to-one with an agent, an agent who's one of the judging panel. And so for me, I had that, and that was when my agent, the brilliant Nell Andrews, offered representation.
Amazing.
So, so I always say to people, if you're thinking of entering competitions, it's really, really worth it, because you don't have to win for it to actually really make a difference to your writing career. So this was, I think she offered representation to a couple of people on
Right.
the shortlist my year, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah,
so
a nice
that
way
was,
to avoid the horror of subbing to agents if you can get away with it.
completely, I know, but people, I always feel bad when people say, how do you get your agent? And they're expecting this awful story of, of sort of triumph over adversity. And I always feel slightly guilty that, but again, I think a good reason to submit to competitions, because agents, either they're involved in judging them, so as in this one, or they just pay attention, if you've been longlisted, shortlisted, or whatever, won a competition. So I absolutely say this is a good thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and so you got the agent, and then how did things go from there? Was it fairly straightforward to get a book deal, or was it difficult?
Well, it was incredibly slow,
Mhm.
mostly because I am incredibly slow. I mean, my book is about a sort of a long train journey, and nothing, nothing about this book feels like it has been a very, very long journey. I mean, because the book wasn't finished when I signed with Nell, I basically spent probably about 2 years, maybe over 2 years, working on the book and sort
Right.
of working with her on it.
That's really
And
interesting because I haven't heard of many people being signed without like a sort of complete polished manuscript. So that's really interesting to know as well.
yeah, I think it does. It really depends on the agent. And Nell is very
Mm.
editorial.
Yeah.
And she's been involved in quite a lot of different competitions and things. So I think she likes working with people at
Yeah.
an early stage. Absolutely not every agent is like this at all. And it can be quite hard to find out which
Mm.
agent is. But I think a rule of thumb is that if an agent is involved with judging competitions and everything and things like that, they may well be more willing to work editorially and take you on at an earlier stage,
That's really
because I
good.
was definitely not ready to submit.
Hmm.
She asked for, just before our first meeting, she asked for the rest of what I had. And I sort of sent it going, it's definitely not finished and it's a big mess. And was amazed that she still wanted to take me on. Um, but yeah, so we worked together, and I just basically we had a big chat about it, and her ideas and my ideas, and then I went away and sent her a finished draft for feedback. But although that finished draft was in the middle of the pandemic, so
Oh,
it's what
right.
I think of as my depressed pandemic draft. It was it was not very good. And so her feedback was basically kind of, there are some good things here, but dot dot dot. So
That's
yeah, so I
probably
went
true of
away.
all first drafts, though, I think, pandemic or not.
Exactly. So I think there can be good and bad things about working with an agent at such an early stage. But
Yeah.
for me, it definitely made me, because I am a slow writer. It at least made me think, oh, somebody is waiting for it.
Yeah.
Um,
That external
so
deadline's really useful.
yeah, definitely. So the sort of the second draft she did really like, luckily, and he'd been very supportive and given feedback. So that whole process was very slow, but then the actual submitting to publishers and getting a publishing deal seemed to happen very, very fast. So I think I had, a really kind of good, exciting experience about, in terms of getting that deal.
And I'm sure that must have been in, quite a large part because she'd worked with you so much. So she knew what was wanted and was able to help you kind of shape it into that kind of thing while, it's still being your book and, true to your vision. I think those things can work together really well.
Definitely, yeah. And she'd sort of loved the story, all the way through, and was only ever supportive. And her emails that she would, send me every now and again, just checking in to
Yeah.
see how the manuscript's doing, that you haven't
Oh,
disappeared off the edge of the planet. And I think, yeah, because it had been a long, she'd seen it sort of coming. She'd really laid the groundwork with editors. She'd been kind of whipping up excitement about it. So yeah, so that was it was a really
Fabulous.
kind of good, quick experience. And yeah, we found fantastic publishers. So Weidenfeld and Nicholson in the UK have been really great, and then Flatiron in the US as well, and some international translation deals, all kind of happened relatively quickly. So it was that kind of whirlwind of excitement that was great.
That's so exciting. And it's so funny. I find how interesting it is that it seems for ages nothing happens, and you think nothing is moving, nothing is changing. And then sometimes it all happens so quickly, you kind of get whiplash.
Absolutely, it's completely, it was nuts. I mean, I work at the university, so I was teaching a seminar, and I could just see my phone, flashing, and oh, and Nell was sending me texts that were kind of getting increasingly frantic. And the last one was that I checked at the end of the seminar was, leave your meeting now.
That's
Students, I'm sorry. Um, and it was because offers were coming through, and yeah, so it was all happening incredibly quickly. So I had these few days of sort of rushing out of classrooms, and then talking to her, and yeah.
And they were so, and were they very time-bound offers that publishers are sometimes fond of? That's why there was the hurry. So they were like, we're going to offer you this, but you need to agree within the next hour, otherwise we're taking it away.
Yeah, exactly. It was that, and Nell said, I think we should refuse, and because she wanted to go to auction,
Yeah,
because there'd been a couple of different offers from different publishers.
yeah,
So yeah, but they have to, yes, you have to reply very quickly. So
right. To let them
I
know.
mean, it's quite good actually that I was too busy to really think about it, because I think I'd be like, really, that's
Yeah.
her offering to publish my book.
Yes, just say
I
yes.
should say
Just say
yes
yes immediately.
to the first
Exactly.
person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. And so when it did get published, what did that feel like?
I mean, it was funny because the kind of all the excitement around the acceptance and the auction was amazing. And then I think I had, a few days of feeling delighted, and then basically sort of 2 years of increasing dread. As publication date very slowly came towards us. So yeah, I think it was about 2 years, which is pretty standard, right? I think
That's
as you
pretty
know.
normal. Yeah, yeah. It's just mind-blowing
Between
when you first find that out, and then you find out that that is just normal.
Exactly. Yeah. So between signing the contract and then it coming out. And yeah, I found it really hard actually, the run up to publication. I sort of felt so anxious about it, and just, was waking up at 4 o'clock every morning, with this
Oh,
sort of dread in my stomach. And then as soon, on publication day, it's just pretty much as soon as it actually came out, I was like, oh, hey, this is fine, and it completely changed.
and what was the dread about then? That it wouldn't be successful, or just a sort of disembodied general anxiety?
Honestly, I'm not sure, because of course beforehand, in the run up to publication, you're getting reviews and things. So that's all out before
Yeah,
before the book is out. And then, they've been getting some really nice reviews, and people have been getting excited about it. So I don't quite know. I think it was a general disembodied dread, and I think it makes you feel very vulnerable, a book being
yes,
being out there with your name on it, and
yes.
and yeah, people, you don't know if people are going to buy it or how it's going to do, even though people have said nice things about it and it's got reviews in good places. There's so much uncertainty about the novel, and I think it feels like it's so much out of your hands. After all of
Yeah.
these years of writing, especially a debut novel that I think a lot of people have spent a long time on,
Mm,
years and years and years, maybe. I
yeah,
certainly spent years on it,
yeah.
where it's just yours and you're in control. And that losing control, I think I found really, really difficult.
That's really interesting.
Um, and also there were events and things, and yes, I had a launch event in Leeds at the Leeds Lit Fest, which was a really good thing, but I was just so nervous.
Mm.
And in fact, it was about a kind of, I think, about the third question in my it was a kind of little interview on stage. About the third question, I sort of started relaxing and kind of thought, oh, you know, I'm talking about my book that I've been working about on for a long time and I'm really proud of. And I kind of started enjoying it from that moment, and all
Wonderful.
that anxiety pretty much disappeared, you know.
Fantastic.
Um but yeah, I always talk about how anxious I felt in the run up, because I think it's quite useful to know that
Yeah.
people feel that,
Yeah.
because everyone's sort of telling you, oh, you must be so excited. This is so
Mm,
great, isn't it? And you kind of go, yes,
okay, if you say
I
so.
suppose so.
Yeah.
So I found it, yeah, it was good to know. Other people had told me that they'd felt anxious as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
think it's just
helpful, isn't
good.
it? That
Mm.
solidarity. I agree, rather than all of us like putting on this facade and then
Yes,
you feel like you're the only one that's anxious.
yes, exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about the book then. So, what inspired you to write it?
Mm. Um, well, I mean, the sort of the seed, I suppose, was planted by a journey on the real Trans-Siberian Express a
Nice.
long time ago when I
Yeah.
was a student. And yeah, I'd been studying in China, and with a couple of friends decided to take to come back to the UK overland, because when you're 19, that seems
That's
like a
what you
sensible
do.
thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we had this fantastic journey. We went to Mongolia for a couple of weeks, and then we took the train from Ulaanbaatar to Moscow as cheaply as possible, which basically involved just staying on the train, not getting off,
Uh-huh.
because it was quite complicated back in the day. This is a long time ago. It was quite tricky and expensive to sort of sort out the train tickets. You had to go through travel agencies. So we just did it ourselves and did it the very, very cheapest way, which is great actually in the end, because it was basically just us and a load of traders. Most of them were from Mongolia. We didn't speak the same language, but everybody was very friendly. So we spent these sort of 5 days, drinking vodka
Nice.
and sharing food and chatting, and obviously spending a lot of time staring out of the window as sort of Siberia and Russia just rolled past.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was, I think like any travel that you do when you're kind of 19, 20, it was just this very, very sort of vivid experience. And came home and kind of went back to normal life, but still always had that in my head. And then years later, at this workshop in Seattle, this is in 2012,
Hmm.
was kind of searching around for a story to write. And yeah, and just sort of remembered this journey and thought, oh, that would make a cool fantasy story, because the journey itself was kind of weird.
Yeah.
I think if you're on a train for so long, it's sort of you end up with this funny little community. Everyone's kind of stuck in the train together.
And
Yeah.
if that was sort of before everybody had smartphones as well, and we didn't have constant internet, then you're in this little bubble, aren't you? And you're cut off from the rest of the world. And it is that sort of feeling like, oh, the whole world could be gone when I get back and I wouldn't know for like 3 days.
Completely, yeah. It's really, really strange, and I think it's sort of hard to remember that now, or hard to understand it if you're younger.
Yeah.
So it's great, yeah. And I think all of this, when you're sort of looking out of the window, and there's just, there's just a lot of forest going past. You're sort of looking into the trees, and you do start thinking,
Start seeing
am I
things.
seeing faces in the trees?
Yeah.
Is something watching me back?
Yeah.
You definitely start thinking that, which then, was a kind of useful inspiration for the Wastelands, which are the
Definitely.
sort of this landscape that is in the book, which is kind of changing and strange and dangerous for people to be in.
Yeah. And had you written any books before that, or was it the first full-length novel you wrote, or
I'd written a kind of a very, very drafty draft of another book. So I'd done NaNoWriMo,
yeah.
National Novel Writing Month, and so I'd during my PhD as well. So I clearly spent a lot of time not doing my PhD. Um, but I'd kind of done that and got to the end of almost like a zero draft. And I think maybe because I was doing other things at the time, I never really thought about polishing it up and trying to do anything with it. It was almost just like, oh well, I've done this and now I'm just going to move on to other things.
Yeah.
So at least I'd done that, and then obviously I'd done the PhD as well. So I sort of knew that I could do, write 100,000 words or
Yeah.
whatever. But this was the first one that I'd
Yeah.
sort of properly finished and polished up and decided I wanted to do something with it.
Yeah. I just find that fascinating because personally, I had to write like 6 or 7 complete novels that I
Right, oh
considered
wow.
finished before I got to, yeah, like the one. So I find it slightly
Mm.
unsettling when people are able to write really good books without having like done all of those practice ones. But of course, it doesn't mean that the work's not in there. It's just, in a different way with a different focus. But I just find it so interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I'd done a lot of short, I had a lot of words behind me, a lot of short
Yeah.
stories, very, very bad short stories, many of them. So
Oh, same as. So let's move on to talking a bit about your writing process then. So I do actually know the answer to this specific question about whether you are a planner or a pantser.
we've talked about this before.
We have.
Yes, I am definitely not a planner. I wish I was. Um, yeah, book one was written over such a long time, and for quite a lot of it, I didn't even really admit to myself that I was writing a novel. I was just kind of filling
Hmm.
in little, bits in notebooks and writing paragraphs here and there.
Nice.
So, I just kind of had all this writing and then sort of put it together. So it was a very chaotic process, very chaotic. So for book two, I thought, right, I'm going to be really organized. I'm going to plan it all carefully, and I will sit down and it will just flow out. And that has not happened at all.
Can't say I'm not
Um,
surprised.
I don't know, I've tried to plan it and I just can't.
Mm.
I mean, I've got some ideas, and I sort of vaguely have things that I'm, aiming for, scenes that I know I want to have in, and ideas and characters. Um, but it's all sort of very vague, and yeah, so I'm
I
still trying to discover the story as I go.
well, I find it really interesting because you're not the first person to say, oh, I write without a plan, but I wish I had wrote with a plan. And I think, why? If it works, I guess it's stressful because it feels like you don't know what's happening until it all pulls together, and then you
Yeah.
just have to trust. But for me, I'm the other way around. I used to plan to death. And I would plan everything, and that was great, but it still wouldn't work out. I would still have to change loads of stuff. So now I still do a lot of planning, like you. I tried the other way, and my brain just
Mm,
refused to do it. So
right.
I can't do it without planning quite a lot, but I try not to. I try to pull back from like planning every tiny bit. Um,
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing how other writers do their, plan or don't plan. I know another writing friend, Frances White, who wrote Voyage of the Damned. Um, she had all these spreadsheets and things, it's quite a complicated kind of, there's a murder mystery. So
Yeah.
yeah, so she had spreadsheets and charts and all sorts, and I'm in awe of that level of organization. I just could not do it.
No, well, we have different, yeah, I just find it so interesting how differently everybody does it and how also everybody thinks that someone else's way is better than theirs.
Yes, exactly. But I think if I haven't managed to change my process by now, I'm probably just not going to do it. So yeah.
Well, partially that, but also I think that we write each book differently. So
Mm,
I was talking to another writer, Sebastian de Castel, who writes young adult fantasy, and he was saying that each book has been completely different. Like some of them just fell into his head fully formed, others he had to like, every page was grueling, and sometimes he would plot a lot, sometimes he wouldn't. And I think, yeah, I like that. I like this kind of try different things and
yeah.
then, don't need, yeah, we don't need to get it perfect each time. We just keep moving.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think it is whatever works for you. And I do think it comes back as well to what you're enjoying. And I
Yes.
really, I really try to keep that in mind because writing a book too is definitely, it is really different. There's got a contract, somebody's waiting for it. And, but I think in order to sort of try and avoid the book two syndrome and being,
Mm.
frozen into inaction. I have just tried to kind of remember, well, why am I doing this, and what is it that, what do I just enjoy? And
Yeah.
I think for me it is just the kind of plunging ahead and and seeing what happens. So I think that's important too.
Yeah. So plotting wise then, so as a planner, I like decide on all, the main points of my plot before I start. So is that something you don't do? Does your plot just emerge? How do you make sure it's got some kind of structure?
Oh,
Or do you not, or is that like,
I
no,
don't
I don't
even
do that.
know. This is this.
No
I
idea.
feel you're asking me all this at the just at the time when I'm kind of worrying about my plot in book two. Um, yeah, I think a lot of it comes out in the edits. So this is what I have learned from book one is that the editing took so long. So even, after my agent, I sent it to my agent that final draft, and we'd worked on it together, and she sort of said, right, it's ready to send out. I then worked probably for about a year with my editor
Yeah,
after having got the book deal,
yeah,
and it went through several rounds of edits. Which at the time I was like, oh God, is this normal? But I think it is pretty
yeah,
pretty normal.
I
And
think
so this
so.
time I'm kind of thinking, right, well, a lot of the plots and the kind of the fine details, I think just, they do come out in the edits. So I'm trying to just plunge ahead. And so yeah, so I think parts of my plot at the moment are not making a huge amount of sense, but I'm hoping that eventually, if I just keep going, get to the end and then go back basically and work out what should be the correct order or what would be the logical thing to happen. Hopefully that will
Yeah.
then get the plot. But yeah, I think that is maybe what happens more if you are a pantser. I think the edits end up perhaps being there's more work maybe because that's just you've kind of discovered the story in the first draft, and then you have to go back and work it all out properly.
Well, and I think that's probably quite reassuring for a lot of writers who do discovery writing, to know that you don't need to know the plot to begin with. It will emerge. And also, being able to have feedback from other people to tell you, like, oh, well, I feel like something like this needs to happen here, or, where you might want to, So do you know about all the plot structure? You know it in theory, presumably.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
probably a lot of it comes out naturally and subconsciously, I would think. And then, like you say, in the edits, you can then look at it. Well, I know I need a midpoint. Where is it? And then, like, draw it
Exactly.
out.
Exactly. And I think at the moment, it feels like the plot, the kind of the book is a sort of skeleton. I've got, these key big points where
Yeah,
something is happening. And I think they have just kind of ended up naturally at the sort of quarter mark, a half mark, etc. So these are the big things.
yeah,
And then yes, and then it will be a case of going back and just sort of shuffling things around, I hope.
yeah. And of course,
Sounds
we can
easy when
all.
you say it.
It does, so easy to say it. And also, there is a lot more flexibility with the structure in novels as opposed to movies, for example. Your midpoint does not need to be exactly in the middle, as with films, it's a bit stricter. So, um, okay, so what about moving on to characters? I thought your characters were so rich and varied, and each of them were so nuanced. Is there anything in particular use to inspire that or to develop them?
I think maybe with characters, I didn't sort of think too much about it as I was writing. And I suppose one thing that I had in mind the whole time was that I wanted the main characters. So there's three point of view characters, and then
Mhm.
another important character. Um, I wanted them all to have kind of different relationships with the wastelands, with the landscape, and
Mhm.
with the train.
Yeah.
So I suppose that was the kind of guiding principle of writing the characters, if there was any principle at all, which was just how do they understand this incredibly dangerous landscape that is sort of wanting, is hungry basically, that are they scared of it, are they intrigued by it, do they want to exploit it, and then the same with the train itself. So having Wei Wei, who's the child of the train, this character who is, she was a sort of orphaned on the train and then basically brought up by the train and the crew.
Yeah.
That was really fun to write because it was just all the kind of the what if questions, or what if this happened, well, how would she sort of understand her place in the world, and then she meets the stowaway. It's not a spoiler, I don't think, because it happens fairly early on, but the
Yeah.
stowaway who is part of the Wastelands, which is this, the landscape that Wei Wei has been brought up to feel is dangerous and has to be kept to arm's length. And so I think a lot of the ways the characters developed were in their relationships to each other, but also to the landscape and to the train itself. So
That's
yeah, I think that was, yeah.
That's so interesting. And particularly, I was thinking about, is it Maria? So I was so intrigued by her immediately with this
Mm.
whole, that's not her real name. And I was like, what's her real name? Well, not, like, more importantly, why has she not got her real name? And what's her secret? And I just was so intrigued by that right away. So did you, when you started writing her, did you know her motivation, or did you just know she had a secret and then that kind of developed later?
Yeah, I think I wasn't entirely sure what had happened. So she's trying to find out what happened on this last journey. So
Yeah.
her father was part of the train crew, and he was blamed for what happened basically. So I knew she was going to try and find
Yeah.
out. But yeah, I think I didn't know either. So this is I suppose this is discovery writers, you kind
Yeah.
of you're almost with the characters themselves in that they have a question maybe, or they're trying to find something, and you're kind of trying to answer that question or find out at the same time. So yeah, so I really enjoyed writing her because I think there is this, somebody who's keeping a secret. It's quite fun to write because sort of there's always the tension. How are they going to manage to keep it? But also someone who's trying to find out the truth. That's just it was a nice kind of way of moving the plot along as well, because
Yeah.
she was having to kind of investigate. So she was having to move around the train to try to find out, yeah, what had happened. And she
Yeah.
had this felt, and of course a kind of an emotional, like a very personal stake in it as well. And that was another thing I found with the characters, that what they wanted kind of needed to be very personal to
Yes. They were
make it.
high personal stakes for all of them, certainly.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that was really good.
Mm.
Okay. What about research? Do you do a lot of research? Did you find there were elements like train research, I suppose, or as like you'd obviously been to
You're,
Siberia, that sort of research?
your worst nightmare, train research. I mean, yes. So I love research as a geeky academic. This makes me very happy. So I did do quite a lot of research on the history of the real Trans-Siberian Express.
Yeah.
And there's huge amounts written about it, and it's the real history is fascinating. And there's this wonderful book. I can't remember what it's called now, of course, but it basically collects together, people's diaries and news articles and various sort of first person accounts of the early days of the train. So there's all these fantastic
Oh,
accounts
wonderful.
of kind of quite well-heeled travelers going on the train in the early 20th century and sort of being horrified by the food and how slow it was and things going wrong. That was really great. So I really enjoyed doing that. But of course, the good thing about writing fantasy is that you can do all the research and be inspired by the real history, but then ignore things as you want,
Yes.
which is exactly what I did. So a lot of the things that I read about and researched didn't make it in, but I think just having all that detail in my mind was really, really helpful for making the train seem very kind of alive for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so just a few more questions, if that's okay. So I was going to say, what does an average writing day look like for you? Or if there isn't an average writing day, how and when do you do your writing?
Yeah, so yes,
You've done your
again,
PhD now, so
I
you've got no motivation.
know. It's a bit like with the planning. I wish I was a little bit more organized with my day. But yeah, so I have two writing days a week. So I work 3 days a week at uni, and I've got two writing days now. So I didn't have this when I was writing book one,
Sure.
but have it now. So it's which is fantastic. But also I find it quite hard, and I have to basically leave home and write in cafes and things
Yeah,
in order to get things done. And I like, writing quite often. We'll write with friends, and do writing sprints and things like
yeah,
that, because I basically needed to sort of trick myself into sitting down and working, because I think, I'm very working at university, you get very institutionalized, you sort of everything's hour by hour, and having meetings or teaching or whatever, your day has a structure. And when you're writing, if you have a whole writing day, the lack of structure I find really, really difficult.
yeah,
So that's why I find writing in cafes or going to the library or something like that, splitting the day up into, okay, now I'm going to do some sort of book one, publicity stuff,
right, yeah,
social media or whatever. And now I'm gonna, answer emails, and now I'm gonna write, or I'm going to go to a cafe and bribe myself to write with promises of cake and coffee.
brilliant.
So yeah, so that's how it works or doesn't work. So I know it sounds like it is a very chaotic process, but yeah.
No, that's so interesting, and I think I might have to try doing that. Okay, and so you've actually just said about what's sort of the most difficult thing about writing, or being, I've said, or being an author. So what's your favorite thing about writing, or about being an author, which is almost sort of two different things?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do, despite that, complaining about not being able to start writing or plot, etc. I do love the actual writing, and I think
Yeah.
when it's going well, and I find that when I'm in a scene, and at least I know I have I've got to the point where I think, oh, now I know what's going to happen in
Mhm.
this scene. It's really lovely to just imagine it, and I especially like the kind of the little details. So they're describing the landscape or rooms and things. So book one was far too long. I had to cut down a lot because if left to my own devices, I would describe everything. There would be a lot of interior decorating. Sort of discussion going on. So I really enjoy that. And then the other thing I really love about the kind of the writing is the or kind of things around the writing is yeah, sort of meeting other people and talking about
Mhm.
writing, and that's been one of the really nice things about publishing a book. Sort of met so many other writers, and yeah, and that's just been great. So I think, if I have a day where I can write with somebody else, with another writer, that's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think the community around writing is so nice and so supportive that it is such a it's a great thing once you find it as well, because I also wrote for quite a few years before I found that community, and
Right.
even realized it was there. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, then. So just as a final question, the old classic, what advice would you give to aspiring writers?
Well, I mean, I think we've said some of this before, actually, just
Yeah.
on that writing community. I would definitely say find your community. And I think so many places they have writing groups already set up that you can find, or it's easier now than ever to set up your own. And you will definitely find, wherever you are, I am sure you would find, other people who write as well. And so finding that, you just a little group of people who you can share the ups and downs of writing with, or talk about books, people who would understand all the kind of the joys and the challenges of writing. I
Yeah.
honestly think that is one of the most important things.
Yeah.
And then, if you're further in and kind of get into the publishing process, definitely you need other people around you, because it's a very confusing process, right? It's hard. It's kind of hard to navigate. It's confusing. You're never quite sure if you're doing the right thing, or what's good and what's not. So I think having other people you can talk to is really important.
That's so true. And yeah, I couldn't imagine kind of trying to go through this without, being able to call up on people that are further along and going, what about this? Is this normal? And, and they can say yes or no, and then you know where you're at a bit more. And that also comes back to something we were talking about earlier with competitions. And I'm also a huge advocate of entering competitions. And that was one way that I found quite a close writing tribe. 12 of
Right.
us that all were finalists for a particular competition
Mm.
became quite close friends and really great advisors. And I really value their community and advice and encouragement.
Definitely, yeah, and that was going to be my other piece of advice. Actually, was find competitions and things to enter, because I think it can be so good just for the feeling that you're taking your writing seriously, you're getting something polished enough to finish. Obviously, then if you do get placed or whatever, that's brilliant, and it can bring this community or an agent, or just you can sort of put it on your writing CV, and it does make people pay attention.
It does, yeah.
And I think sort of linked to that, I would say as well, I think my bit of advice is to just turn off that, or don't always listen to that inner editor who's telling you, oh, well, there's no point entering this competition, or your writing's not good enough, or whatever. I think if you're getting to the point where you feel I want to take this more seriously, and I need to take a next step, competitions are brilliant, but can absolutely, be your I definitely almost got derailed by that kind of, that crisis of confidence.
Yeah.
That little voice saying, oh yeah, why do you think you should enter this competition? You've got no
Hmm.
chance.
Interesting.
So just kind of trying to push that away, I think is
Yeah,
is really important.
that's really great advice. Well, thank you so much. I have found it so interesting talking to you more in depth in about all of these aspects of writing and learning more about it.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and
It's been lovely to talk to you.
and I'm sure that yeah, our audience will get so much out of it as well. So yes, thank you so much. And the Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands is out in all good bookshops. So make sure you pick up a copy. And does your second book have a title yet?
It's called The Sea Library,
Okay. And do
SEA.
and do we know when that might be out or no date yet?
We do not.
Okay, no worries. So you can follow Sarah on Instagram at Sarah_L_Brooks. And yeah, do check out the Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands. It's fantastic. So if you enjoyed this interview, but there were some questions I didn't ask that you would like me to, then please let us know in the comments. And if there was anything that you found particularly useful, then please let us know. And if you liked this, then there is a very convenient way that you can let us know. And that really does help us out as well. And if you enjoyed this interview, please do make sure that you check out our interviews with the other authors. Until then, happy writing.